Hi, I'm Brianna Hughes. I'm a psych undergraduate at the University of Charleston and Professor Spiker's personality class. I have recently read an autobiography called The Life and Times of Thunderbolt Kids, and I will evaluate it with McCrae and Costa's five-factor personality theory. Going to this project, I had no idea what I wanted to originally read about. I thought about all the famous people, but then I realized I didn't want to do anyone famous. I'd rather do someone a little more off the grid. So I chose Bill Bryson, and he's a more relatable, average guy who didn't write about tragedy, didn't write about despair. He wrote about the happiness of his childhood. And I really was intrigued by that, and the book was so funny, and I'm so glad I chose it, but that was the reasoning behind choosing Bill Bryson. And to tell you a little bit more about his life, he did grow up in the 1950s, so America is this big economic powerhouse, and people never had it so better. You could own 2 cars now. There was a threat of the atomic bomb, so people were trained to hide under their desks and act appropriately, which Bill Bryson disagreed with vehemently because he thought, if a nuclear bomb's going to hit, it's just going to blow you away. So he chose not to partake in safety measures. Also, he describes his childhood as having hundreds of kids around him all the time because it just felt like that to him. They were everywhere. He always had someone to go outside and play with, and it was a really interesting perspective that it was written from. That's why I like the book so much, I think. And also the five-factor model, that's the model that I chose to understand Bill, because you can apply it to children, because I only have them through 5 through 18, so it was a little harder than I thought it would be. But the five-factor model has 5 main personality traits. These traits are bipolar, meaning that the majority of people who score in the middle, will score in the middle of a bell-shaped curve. The traits are extroversion, neuroticism, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Neuroticism and extroversion are usually the strongest traits in defining a personality, so they're the most influential to us. Then openness and conscientiousness, agreeableness, those are a little harder to define, but they're more subtle personality traits, like would we work harder or would we get along with people more, depending on how high or low is how your personality is. The core components of our personalities are basic tendencies, and McCrae and Costa define them as inherited and printed on us in an early life, or they may be modified by disease or pathological intervention. They define an individual as they define an individual at any given time of their life. The basic tendencies do. This is an especially important factor in the life of Bill Bryson because it focuses heavily on childhood. Characteristic adaptations also shape our personalities. These are acquired through one's environment and how your personality adjusts to it. This is important for Bill because he grew up in the middle of the 50s, and this during the Red Scare, and terrifying realness of the atom bomb. The difference, so because he grew up during the Red Scare, suspicion followed him around a lot because, you never know who the communist is. It could be your neighbor. It could be in the White House. You never knew. So suspicion did follow him throughout his life, and he actually projected most of his suspicions on adults, which is really interesting. I didn't expect that, but to this day, he doesn't really trust adults, and I kind of like that about him. Excuse me. The difference between basic tendencies and characteristic adaptations is that one's environment may change over time, therefore your characteristic adaptations will also change, but your basic tendencies will generally stay with you forever. Bill relates to this theory, like the five-factor theory, in a lot of ways, but I'll talk to you about a couple. His willingness to be extroverted, which is a very important component in our personalities, is very important. A lot of his memories are recounting the things he did with his friends, and friends were your whole life in the 1950s. Like, you didn't really have much else. We didn't have computer games then. Our faces weren't glued to a screen. But he describes going out and playing kickball or field hockey and stuff like that. He often tells stories of his friends and how they got into the worst kinds of troubles, but he wouldn't have done any of that if he wasn't extroverted. He wanted to get out there. He wanted to experience things because he was just open to the idea of it, and that's that's great. Also, an important characteristic and characteristic adaptation is one's self-concept. His self-concept is reflected in the Thunderbolt Kid. No, he's not a superhero in real life, but still, like, you believe when you're a child that you're extraordinary, that you're different, that you have greatness inside of you, and the belief in this greatness may have somewhat influenced him to write about his life and write about his childhood, because he did think it was great then. He was a superhero, so it pushed him probably to write as the wonderful books that he has now, and what brought him to where he is today. In conclusion, I believe this theory was successfully applied to Bill Bryson because it's the theory for your average everyday person. You can evaluate anyone. You don't need to be crazy to apply to the 5-factor personality model. It's just really average. He's a really average guy who needs a really average theory, I guess. And I'm glad that I took part in this assignment because I learned about a person that I would never have known about before, and this theory allowed me to understand him a lot better, and because it can be applied to children, it allowed me to understand real life, his life now. So, thank you, and see you in class.